Hi, guys. Tonight, we begin a journey into a world that exists in the quiet spaces between the marble columns of history. We're going back to a time when the night wasn't just a period of rest, but a carefully constructed ritual of intellectual survival. Before we dive into the dim light of the ancient Athenian night, I would love it if you just take a moment to subscribe to this channel and give this video a like. It really helps these stories reach those who need a bit of quiet. And I'm curious, where are you right now? And when are you listening? Are you tucked away in bed, or perhaps watching the rain against a window? Let me know in the comments. I read them all, and they mean a lot to me. Now, settle in. Let's talk about the Symposium. To understand the ancient Greek party, we must first strip away everything we know about modern celebrations. There were no loud speakers, no crowded dance floors, and no chaotic mingling. Instead, there was the Symposium. The word itself, symposium, is quite simple in its origin. It comes from the Greek syn, meaning together, and painein, meaning to drink. Literally, it means drinking together. But in the context of a city like Athens, it meant so much more than a simple gathering. It was a formal, almost surgical, social institution. Imagine a world where your social standing, your political future, and even your personal safety depended on how you behaved in a room full of reclining men. The Symposium was not an escape from society, it was a concentrated version of it. It was a place where the elite reinforced their identity, where the good and beautiful men of the city met to confirm that they were, indeed, the ones in charge. In the modern world, we often view a party as a moment of chaos or a loss of control. But for the ancient Greek mind, chaos was the enemy. The Symposium was designed to tame the wildness of wine and conversation. It was a structured environment where every action, from the way you held your cup to the way you argued a point of law, was scrutinized. Think about the silence of the city outside. Most of Athens would be dark, the narrow streets quiet and treacherous. But inside the walls of a wealthy home, in a room called the andron, the lamps were lit. The smell of olive oil, roasted nuts, and watered-down wine filled the air. This was the sanctuary of the male citizen. When we look at the historical records, like those left by Plato or Xenophon, we see that the Symposium was the primary venue for intellectual life. It was here that the seeds of Western philosophy were planted. Not in a sterile classroom, but on a cushioned couch, with a shallow bowl of wine in hand. But why was it so boringly structured? Why the rules? Why the rigid seating? Because the Greeks understood something we often forget, that true freedom of thought requires a framework. By fixing the seating, by regulating the wine, and by appointing a leader for the evening, they created a space where the mind could wander, without the body losing its way. As we go deeper tonight, we will explore the nuances of this together drinking. We will look at the architecture of the rooms, the chemistry of the wine, and the slow, rhythmic pulse of the music that kept the night moving. But for now, just hold on to that definition. A symposium wasn't a party. It was a ritual of connection. The flickering shadows on the painted walls told stories of gods and heroes, but the men on the couches were writing their own history, one slow, deliberate sip at a time. It was a world of whispers, of deep voices, and of a silence that was just as important as the speech. This was the Symposium. And it was only the beginning of the night. Tonight, we must look at the man behind the heavy wooden doors. The host. In our modern world, inviting people over is often a casual affair, a quick text, a few snacks, and very little consequence. But in ancient Athens, to host a symposium was to step onto a battlefield of social reputation. It was a burden, a beautiful, expensive, and often exhausting obligation. Let us imagine the host's morning, long before the sun has begun to set over the Saronic Gulf. He wakes up in a house that is quiet, but already buzzing with the silent work of his household. For him, this day is not about leisure. It is about philotimia, the love of honor. To the Greek mind, your house was not just a shelter, it was a museum of your character. Every pillar, every painted tile, and every servant was a reflection of your worth as a citizen. The financial cost alone was staggering. Think of the wine. A host could not simply serve the local vintage, the kind the laborers drank in the taverns near the Piraeus. No. He had to source the finest imports. He had to look for the amphorae stamped with the seals of Chios, or Thassos, or Lesbos. These wines were thick, sweet, and carried the scent of distant islands. They were transported in ships across dangerous waters, and to serve them was to say, I am connected to the wider world. I have the means to bring the ocean to your cup. But the cost of the wine was only the surface. Think of the oil. To light a symposium for 6 or 7 hours required a massive amount of olive oil. Dozens of lamps, crafted from bronze or fine clay, had to be filled and refilled. The light had to be perfect, not too bright to be harsh, but not so dim that the guests couldn't see the expressions on each other's faces. In a world without electricity, light was wealth. To burn oil all night was to burn money, literally, for the sake of conversation. Now, consider the andron. The room of men. This room was the host's primary investment. In a typical Greek house, the family lived in modest, functional spaces. But the andron was different. It often had the finest mosaic floors in the house, intricate patterns of pebbles or stones depicting scenes from myths. Why? Because the host knew that his guests would be reclining, eyes cast downward, for hours. The floor was their horizon. If the floor was plain, the host was considered unimaginative. If it was beautiful, he was a man of culture. The host also had to manage the human element. This was perhaps the most taxing part of the obligation. He had to select the guests with the precision of a jeweler. You couldn't just invite anyone. You needed a balance. You needed the loud, charismatic politician to provide energy. You needed the quiet, brooding philosopher to provide depth. And you needed the musician to bridge the gaps in silence. If the mixture of personalities was wrong, the night would be a disaster. And in a small city like Athens, a bad party was talked about for years. Imagine the host standing in the empty andron as the sun begins to dip. He checks the cushions on the klinai. Are they soft enough? Are they covered in the right fabrics, perhaps purple dyes from Phoenicia? He looks at the crater, the massive mixing bowl that will soon sit in the center of the room. It is bronze, polished until it reflects his own anxious face. He is the architect of an invisible structure. He is creating a space where men can feel free, while he himself is bound by 1,000 rules of etiquette. There is also the matter of the hetairai. If the host wanted a truly top-tier symposium, he had to hire professional companions. These women were not just there for beauty. They were the most educated women in the city. They could quote Homer, they could play the alas, and they could challenge a man's logic. Hiring them cost a small fortune. But to exclude them was to risk a dry, boring evening that lacked the spark of wit. As the guests begin to arrive, the host must transition into his final role: the invisible servant. Paradoxically, the best host was the one who seemed to be doing nothing at all. He had to ensure that the slaves moved like shadows, refilling cups before they were empty, clearing plates without making a sound. He had to watch the eyes of his guests. Is that man getting too angry? Is that one falling asleep? He had to signal the symposiarch with a subtle nod to adjust the wine-to-water ratio. It was a performance of sophrosyne, of balance. If the host drank too much, he lost control of his house. If he drank too little, he seemed distant and judgmental. He had to walk the thin line between being a participant and being a guardian. And when the night finally ended, when the last guest stumbled out into the pre-dawn grayness, the host's work was still not done. He had to tally the social gains. Did the general agree with his view on the war? Did the merchant seem interested in a new trade deal? Did his reputation rise? He would look at his stained floors, his empty amphory, and his exhausted servants. The financial cost was gone, vanished into the bellies and minds of his peers. But if he had done it right, he had woven a web of influence that was worth more than all the silver in the mines of Laurium. This was the host's burden: to be the silent pillar upon which the entire structure of Greek social life rested. A man who spent a fortune just to hear his friends talk, and to ensure that for one night, the world felt orderly, beautiful, and wise. Think of that man, as he finally closes his eyes, the smell of the extinguished lamps still hanging in the air. The symposium is over. But the history it created is just beginning to breathe. The sun has finally disappeared behind the jagged peaks of the mountains, and the city of Athens is draped in a blanket of soft, indigo shadows. A guest approaches the house of the host. He does not rush. In this world, speed is for the commoner, but the gentleman moves with a deliberate, measured pace. As he reaches the heavy wooden door, he enters a space that is neither fully outside nor fully inside. This is the threshold. And upon arrival, a guest did not simply walk in and find a seat. That would be a violation of the sacred laws of Xenia, the ancient Greek code of hospitality. Instead, the arrival was a slow, multi-layered ritual of shedding the outside world. Imagine the guest standing there, the dust of the Athenian streets still clinging to his ankles. The first thing he encounters is not the host, but a silent servant, a slave whose entire existence tonight is dedicated to the comfort of others. The guest pauses. He does not speak. He simply waits. The servant kneels at his feet. This is the first act of the night: the removal of the sandals. In ancient Greece, to enter a room of high status with your shoes on was unthinkable. The sandals, made of worn leather and tied with thin cords, carry the grit and the noise of the marketplace. As they are untied, one by one, the guest feels the cool stone floor against his bare skin. It is a grounding sensation. He is leaving the chaos of the city behind, and entering the sanctuary of the andron. But removing the sandals is not enough. The dust of the road is a physical reminder of the world's impurity. The servant brings forward a basin, usually made of polished bronze or simple clay, filled with cool, clear water. The guest's feet are washed. Think about the sound of that water. A soft, rhythmic splashing in the quiet hallway. The servant's hands are careful, methodical. This is not just about cleanliness, it is about transition. The water rinses away the fatigue of the day. It rinses away the sweat of the sun. As the feet are dried with a clean linen cloth, the guest feels a sense of lightness. He is being prepared, step by step, for a night of the mind. Next, the hands. In a world where people eat with their fingers, clean hands are a necessity, but here, it is also a ceremony. A second servant pours water from a silver winokoi, a slender pitcher, over the guest's outstretched palms. The water is often scented with a hint of herbs, perhaps a touch of mint or lavender. The scent is faint, almost a memory, but it begins to prime the senses for what is to come. The guest is now clean, but he is not yet ready. He must be adorned. Before he can enter the andron, he is offered a wreath, a Stephanos. These are not the heavy, golden crowns of kings. They are fragile, living things. Woven from sprigs of ivy, or perhaps myrtle, or even celery. Why ivy? The Greeks believed that ivy, the plant of Dionysus, had a cooling effect on the brain. They believed that by wearing this green circle around their head, they could ward off the heaviness of the wine. It was a biological shield made of leaves. As the servant places the wreath upon the guest's head, the scent of crushed greenery fills his nose. It is the smell of the earth, brought indoors. Now, the guest stands at the entrance of the andron. He is barefooted, his hands are scented, and his head is crowned with ivy. He looks into the room. The oil lamps are flickering, casting long, golden fingers across the walls. He sees the klinai, the couches, waiting in a silent circle. He does not pick a seat at random. He waits for the host to gesture. There is a hierarchy even in reclining. The most honored guests are placed furthest from the door, in the safest, most prestigious corner. The host guides him with a quiet word, a soft touch on the shoulder. The guest approaches his assigned couch. It is high, requiring a small step to ascend. He does not sit. He maneuvers his body to lie down on his left side. His left elbow rests on a firm, embroidered cushion. His right arm remains free, the arm that will hold the cup, the arm that will gesture during a debate. As he settles onto the couch, he feels the texture of the fabric. It might be wool from Miletus, or linen from Egypt. It is slightly rough, yet supportive. He adjusts his weight. He looks across the room at the other men, who are undergoing the same transition. They are all shedding their public personas. The politician is no longer on the Nix giving a speech. The merchant is no longer at the harbor. They are becoming symposiasts. The room is filling with the low hum of voices, but it is still quiet. The transition is not yet complete. There is a final layer of preparation, a mental settling. The guest looks at the empty center of the room. He knows that soon, the crater will be brought in. He knows that soon, the silence will be replaced by the sound of the aulos. But for now, in this moment of arrival, he simply breathes. He breathes in the smell of the oil, the ivy, and the old wood of the house. He is no longer a man of the street. He is a man of the night. Think of the stillness of that moment. The feeling of being clean, being welcomed, and being part of a tradition that has existed for centuries. The arrival is over. The preparation is done. The world outside has ceased to exist. Now that our guest has settled onto his couch, let us take a moment to look around the room itself. This is the andron. It is the heart of the Greek house, yet it is a world set apart. If the rest of the home is a place for family, for weaving, and for the daily chores of survival, the andron is a sanctuary of the mind. It is a room designed with a single, quiet purpose in mind, the symposium. To the modern eye, the andron might seem small, but its architecture is a masterpiece of psychological design. Most androns were square, a shape that suggests stability and enclosure. But it is the floor that first captures the attention. As you lie on your couch, your gaze naturally falls downward. You are not looking at the ceiling, you are looking at the earth beneath you. In a wealthy home, the floor is not mere stone. It is a lithostrotos, a mosaic made of thousands of tiny, naturally colored pebbles. Imagine the craftsman, kneeling for weeks, placing each stone by hand. They create patterns of swirling water, or perhaps the vines of Dionysus crawling toward the corners of the room. These patterns are not meant to be distracting. They are meant to be hypnotic. As the wine begins to flow, the stones seem to move, the waves on the floor seem to ripple, creating a sense that the room itself is breathing with you. Notice the most unusual feature of the andron's architecture: the floor is not flat. Around the edges of the room, there is a raised platform, a pavement about a foot wide and a few inches high. This is where the couches, the klinai, are placed. Why this raised edge? It serves a practical purpose, keeping the guests above the center of the room where the servants move and where the wine might spill. But it also serves a symbolic one. To step up onto the platform is to step into the circle of citizens. You are elevated, literally and figuratively, above the common ground. The couches are arranged in a U shape or a full circle. In architecture, a circle is the most democratic of shapes. There is no head of the table. There is no one sitting at the back of the room. Every man is facing the center. Every man is visible to every other man. The walls of the andron are like a mirror, reflecting the social unity of the group. Let us look at the walls themselves. They are often painted in deep, earthy tones. A rich Pompeian red or a dark, forest green. These colors absorb the light from the oil lamps, preventing harsh glares. The Greeks understood that a room for talking should be a room of shadows. In the dim light, the corners of the room seem to disappear. The walls feel soft, almost like they are draped in velvet. This creates an intimacy, a feeling that the words spoken here stay here, trapped within the thick, mud brick walls. And what of the ceiling? High above, the wooden beams are often exposed. They are dark, seasoned by the smoke of 1,000 lamps. If you look closely, you might see painted patterns on the rafters, geometric shapes that repeat over and over. Squares inside squares. Spirals that never end. These are the patterns of the universe, hidden in the shadows of a private home. There is only one door. And it is rarely in the center of the wall. The door of an andron is almost always offset to one side. This is a clever bit of architectural planning. It allows the couches to be placed in a perfect, continuous line around the room without being interrupted by the entrance. It also ensures privacy. If someone walks past the open door in the courtyard, they cannot see the guests reclining inside. The symposium is a secret world, shielded by the very geometry of the house. Now, think of the air in this room. There are few windows, perhaps only one or two small openings high up near the ceiling to let out the lamp smoke. The air is heavy. It smells of beeswax and the faint, metallic tang of the bronze wine vessels. It is a still air. A quiet air. When a man speaks, his voice does not echo, it is absorbed by the cushions, the tapestries, and the bodies of his friends. In the center of the room, the floor is slightly depressed, or perhaps it has a small drain. This is for the kottabos game, and for the washing of the floor after the night is done. Even in this, the architecture is honest. It knows that the night will be messy. It knows that wine will be spilled, and that the earth must receive it. This room, the andron, is a machine for social harmony. It is not just a place, it is a participant in the conversation. It holds the guests in its grip, forcing them to look at one another, to listen to one another, and to become part of the same, slow, rhythmic story. The lamps flicker. A shadow dances across a mosaic dolphin on the floor. The room feels ancient even when it is new. It feels like a place where time has decided to slow down, just for a few hours. The architecture of the andron is the architecture of peace. It is a fortress of quiet, in a world that is often too loud. As the guest finds his place, we must talk about the most unusual aspect of his presence. He is not sitting. He is not standing. He is reclining. This is the klinai posture, a physical act that defined the upper class of the ancient world. To the modern mind, lying down while eating feels like a recipe for discomfort, but to the Athenian, it was the very definition of being a free man. Imagine the guest as he lowers his body onto the couch. This is not a casual collapse. It is a deliberate, practiced movement. He leans on his left side, his weight supported by a single elbow. The left arm, bent at the joint, rests upon a thick, embroidered cushion. This leaves the right arm, the dominant arm, entirely free. Free to reach for a piece of salted fish, free to gesture toward a friend, and most importantly, free to lift the wine cup to his lips. Think about the physiology of this position. It is a posture of absolute vulnerability, yet absolute power. A man who is reclining cannot run away. He cannot jump into a fight. He is rooted in his comfort. By lying down, the guest is making a silent declaration to the room. I am safe here. I trust the men in this circle. I have no need to stand because my status is already tall enough. In the city outside, the slaves are standing. The laborers are crouching in the dirt. The women are sitting upright at their looms. But in the andron, gravity is surrendered. To sit upright was considered the mark of a child, or someone of low status who did not have the right to relax. The horizontal line was the line of the elite. But let us be honest about the sensation of this posture as the hours begin to stretch. At first, it feels like a luxury. The soft wool of the cushions supports the ribs. The legs are stretched out, crossing at the ankles, relaxed and heavy. But as the first hour passes, and the second, the body begins to speak. The left elbow, bearing the weight of the torso, starts to feel the pressure. The nerves begin to hum with a dull, persistent ache. Yet, the guest does not move. He does not shift to his right side. That would be a breach of etiquette. Everyone must face the same direction. Everyone must follow the same geometry. The discomfort is part of the ritual. It is a test of sophrosyne, of endurance and self-control. You must remain elegant, even as your arm begins to go numb. You must maintain the illusion of effortless ease. Think about the perspective this creates. When you sit in a chair, the world is vertical. But when you recline, the world shifts. Your eyes are at the same level as the eyes of every other man in the room. You are not looking up at a superior, and you are not looking down at an inferior. You are part of a horizontal brotherhood. This eye-level intimacy is what allowed the symposium to be a place of such deep, and often dangerous, conversation. The cushions themselves are worth noticing. They are not the soft, memory foam pillows of our time. They are stuffed with wool, or perhaps dried seagrass. They have a certain density to them. They smell of the sheep they came from, and the perfumes of the house. As the guest leans, he can feel the heat of his own body being trapped by the fabric. It becomes a warm, cozy cocoon in the dimly lit room. Notice how the feet are positioned. They are at the far end of the couch, often near the head of the next guest. This circular arrangement creates a chain of bodies. Your head is near the feet of the man to your left. Your feet are near the head of the man to your right. It is an unbroken ring of humanity. In the dim light of the lamps, with the wine slowly clouding the mind, the boundaries between individuals begin to blur. You are no longer just a person, you are a link in a social chain. The right hand moves, slowly. It reaches for a kylix. Because you are reclining, the act of drinking is different. You cannot gulp. You must sip carefully, tilting the wide bowl toward your face. If you move too fast, the wine will spill down your chin and onto your clean tunic. The posture forces you to be slow. It forces you to be deliberate. It turns every physical action into a meditation. Think of the silence that comes with this posture. When men stand, they are restless. They pace. They move their hands. But when men recline, they become still. Their voices drop in volume. The conversation becomes a low, murmuring tide. The room feels heavy with the weight of bodies that have no intention of moving for a long, long time. As the night reaches its middle, the guest might feel a sense of floating. Propped up on his elbow, with his legs feeling distant and light, the andron seems to drift away from the earth. The floor, with its mosaic dolphins and vines, is the only thing that feels solid. The reclining posture is the ultimate boring luxury. It is the art of doing nothing, with extreme precision. It is a posture of the past. A posture of a world that had time to spend an entire night on a single side. A world that understood that the most important thoughts often come, not when we are running, but when we are leaning, waiting, and listening to the slow breath of the room. The guest closes his eyes for a moment. He feels the pressure on his elbow. He feels the ivy crown on his head. He is a reclining monument to a civilization that valued the quiet, the slow, and the still. The room is now full. The guests are reclining on their left elbows, their bodies forming a perfect circle around the empty center of the andron. The air is thick with anticipation, but there is a strange, formal silence hanging over the men. Something is missing. The night has a host, and it has guests, but it does not yet have a leader. Before the first drop of wine can be drawn from the large mixing bowl, the group must perform a crucial task. They must elect the symposiarch. The symposiarch, or the master of the drink. Imagine the gravity of this moment. In our modern world, we don't think of a party as needing a ruler. But for the ancient Greeks, a gathering without a leader was a gathering that invited chaos. And chaos, to a Greek citizen, was a form of failure. They believed that the wine held a spirit, a wild, untamed energy that could either lift a man to the gods or drag him down to the beasts. To manage this energy, they needed a king for the night. The election begins in total quiet. There are several ways this could happen. Sometimes, it is a matter of pure chance. A servant brings forward the astragaloi, small knuckle bones or dice. They are thrown onto the mosaic floor, clattering against the small stones that depict dolphins and vines. The man who throws the highest number is chosen. Think about that for a moment. The entire fate of the evening, the rhythm of the conversation, and the level of everyone's intoxication is handed over to the whim of the dice. It is a way of saying that the gods have chosen the leader. Other times, the choice is more deliberate. The guests look around the room. They look for the man who has the most sophrosyne, the most self-control. They want someone who can drink without becoming a fool. Someone who can lead a debate without becoming a tyrant. Someone who knows the balance between gravity and laughter. A quiet nod goes around the circle. A consensus is reached. Once the symposiarch is chosen, a subtle but profound shift occurs in the room. He is no longer just a guest. He is the basileus, the king of this small, temporary kingdom. Even the master of the house, the man who paid for the wine and the food, must now submit to the symposiarch's will. The symposiarch's first duty is to sit, or rather recline, and observe. He is the architect of the atmosphere. He must decide the water-to-wine ratio. This was not a simple task. It was a calculation of the soul. He looks at the men on the couches. He considers their age, their temperaments, and the seriousness of the night's topic. If he feels the guests are too tense, he may call for a stronger mixture. If he feels they are becoming too rowdy, he will quietly command the servants to add more water. He is like a scientist, adjusting the levels of a potent chemical. He wants to achieve enthusiasmus, a state where the mind is inspired, where the tongue is loose, but where the feet can still find their sandals. Think of the power this man holds in his right hand. He decides when the cups are refilled. He decides the pace of the night. If he sees a guest who is drinking too fast, he might change the direction of the wine serving. If he sees a man who is being ignored, he will pull him into the conversation. He is the guardian of the group's harmony. And then, there are the laws of the drink. The symposiarch might decree that everyone must drink a full cup in one go. Or he might decree that no one can drink until they have answered a riddle. These are not just games. They are tests. Tests of dignity. Tests of endurance. Under his watchful eye, every man is forced to monitor himself. Imagine the symposiarch's face in the flickering lamplight. He is the only one who cannot truly lose himself in the revelry. He must stay half sober, even as he leads the toasts. He must be the anchor in the storm of the evening. He watches the servants as they move with the winokoi, the pitchers. He watches the crater as the level of the liquid slowly drops. If the night goes well, no one will notice his work. The conversation will flow like a gentle river. The laughter will be frequent but not jarring. The wisdom will seem to come from nowhere. But if the night fails, the blame rests solely on him. A bad symposiarch leads his friends into shame. a good one leads them into memory. As the first official round of wine is prepared, the symposiarch takes his first sip. It is the tasting. He confirms that the mixture is correct. He nods to the servants. The basileus has spoken. The order is established. The ritual can now move forward into the heart of the night. Think of the weight of that responsibility, the silent pressure of holding 10 or 20 men in a state of perfect balance. In a world where democracy was often chaotic, the symposium was a place of perfect, monarchical order, ruled by a king of the night, chosen by a throw of the dice. The night is young. The master of the drink is ready. And the wine, dark and mysterious, is waiting to be served. The election is over, and the ruler of the night has taken his seat. But the most important element of the evening still sits in its pure, dangerous state. The wine. In ancient Greece, wine was never just a drink. It was a gift from Dionysus, a liquid fire that held the power to transform the soul. But like fire, it had to be controlled. It had to be tamed. And the tool for this taming was water. Imagine the crater, that massive, wide-mouthed bronze vessel sitting in the center of the andron. It is the altar of the evening. Inside this vessel, a transformation is about to occur. To drink wine kottabos, or unmixed, was considered by the Greeks to be a sign of madness, a trait of the northern barbarians. A civilized man, a man of the polis, always mixed his wine. Think about the water itself. It was not just any water. It had to be cool, fresh, and pure. Servants would often fetch it from deep wells or shaded springs just before the symposium began. In the dim light of the room, the water is poured into the crater first. It creates a soft, splashing sound, a clear, crystalline base for the night's journey. Then comes the wine. It is thick, dark, and syrupy. Ancient Greek wine was not like the light, filtered liquids we know today. It was rich in sugars and high in alcohol, often infused with the scent of pine resin, or herbs, or even honey. As it is poured into the water, you can see the colors swirling together. Dark purples and deep reds dancing in the clear liquid, like smoke in the wind. The symposiarch watches this process with the eyes of a chemist. He must decide the ratio. This is where the soul of the evening is decided. A ratio of 3 parts water to 1 part wine was the standard for a long, intellectual night. It was the philosopher's mix. It provided enough stimulation to keep the conversation flowing, but not enough to cloud the logic. It was a drink of the mind. If the mood was lighter, perhaps the ratio became 2 to 1. But never, ever, equal parts. To mix half and half was to invite a quick end to the night. It was seen as reckless. The Greeks believed that the water was the civilizing element. It was the logic that kept the passion of the wine from burning too brightly. Imagine the silence in the room as the guests watch the servant stir the mixture. They use a kottabos, a long-handled ladle. The sound of the metal against the bronze crater is a soft, melodic chime. Clink, clink, clink. It is the heartbeat of the symposium. The movement of the ladle ensures that every cup served tonight will be identical. There is no hidden strength here, only the strength the symposiarch has decreed. Why were they so afraid of pure wine? They told stories of the centaurs, who drank unmixed wine at a wedding and lost their minds, turning a celebration into a massacre. For the Greek citizen, the dilution of wine was a metaphor for life itself. We have passions, we have desires, but we must dilute them with reason, with law, and with tradition. The crater was a reminder that even our pleasures must be governed. Think of the texture of the mixture. As the water and wine become one, the liquid loses its syrupy weight. It becomes light, refreshing, and easy to drink. This was necessary because the symposium was not a sprint. It was a marathon. A guest might drink 10, 12, or 15 cups over the course of the night. If the wine were pure, no man could stand after the first hour. But with the water, the night can stretch until the stars begin to fade. The temperature was also a concern. In the heat of a Mediterranean summer, a warm drink was a failure. Some hosts would use sikters, double-walled vessels filled with snow brought down from the mountains and packed in straw. The snow would sit in the center, cooling the wine through the bronze walls without ever touching it. To drink cool, diluted wine while reclining on a soft couch was to experience the height of human comfort. As the first cup is ladled out, the guest looks at the color. It is no longer dark as blood, but a bright, transparent ruby. It catches the light of the oil lamps, glowing with a soft, inner fire. It is beautiful. It is safe. It is ready. The act of mixing was the final preparation. The transition from the wild vine to the civilized cup. It was the moment where nature was invited into the home, but only on the host's terms. The guests wait. The symposiarch nods. The first cup is carried toward the most honored guest. The night is now balanced. The fire has been tamed by the water. And the voices, which have been quiet until now, are ready to rise. The wine has been mixed. The crater sits in the center of the room, a dark, shimmering pool of potential. But even now, as the thirst of the guests begins to grow, they do not drink. To do so would be a profound act of arrogance. In the ancient world, before a man can satisfy his own desires, he must acknowledge the gods who allow him to exist. This is the moment of the libation, the ritual of the spond. Imagine the atmosphere in the andron. The laughter has died down. The servants have stopped moving. A heavy, respectful silence settles over the reclining men. This is not just a formality. For the Greeks, the gods were not distant concepts, they were invisible guests in the room. And no guest, especially a divine one, should be ignored. A servant approaches the symposiarch with a special vessel, a phial. This is a shallow, handleless bowl, specifically designed for pouring offerings. It is made of gold or silver, catching the flickering light of the oil lamps like a captured star. The symposiarch takes the bowl in his steady hands. He does not rush. Every movement is a meditation. He looks into the wine. For a moment, he sees his own reflection on the dark surface, a reminder of his mortality. Then, he lifts the bowl. The first offering is dedicated to Agathos Daimon, the good spirit. This is the spirit of the household, the protector of the family and the vine. The symposiarch tilts the bowl, and a thin, ruby stream of wine falls toward the mosaic floor. Think about the sound of that liquid hitting the stones. A soft, splashing tap. It is the only sound in the room. The wine flows over the depiction of a dolphin or a vine leaf, soaking into the gaps between the pebbles. This is the earth's portion. By pouring the wine onto the floor, the Greeks were symbolically returning the gift to the ground from which it grew. It was an act of humility. But the ritual does not end there. 3 distinct libations must be made, each with its own purpose, each with its own weight. The first bowl, as we said, is for the Olympian gods. Zeus, Hera, and the great family of the sky. By offering this first, the men are acknowledging the order of the universe. They are saying that their little gathering in this small room is part of a much larger, cosmic harmony. The second bowl is for the heroes, the great ancestors of the past. Achilles, Odysseus, and the legendary founders of their city. To the Greeks, the dead were never truly gone. They lived in the memory of the living. By pouring wine for the heroes, the guests are inviting the wisdom of the past into their conversation. They are anchoring themselves in history. And finally, the third bowl. This is the most important one for the night ahead. It is dedicated to Zeus Soter, Zeus the Savior. It is a prayer for safety. Not safety from enemies outside the walls, but safety from the wine itself. A prayer that the night ends in wisdom, not in violence. A prayer that they remain friends when the sun rises. Imagine the scent that rises from the floor as the wine hits the warm stones. It is a sharp, sweet aroma, the essence of the gift. As the wine disappears into the floor, it feels as though the room has been purified. The tension of the outside world is gone. The boundaries between the human and the divine have been acknowledged. The guests watch each pour with a quiet, rhythmic breathing. They are not just spectators, they are participants in a sacred contract. After each libation, a short hymn or a prayer is often sung. This is the paean. It is not a loud, operatic song. It is a low, melodic chant, hummed by 20 men in unison. Think of the vibration of those voices. A deep, resonant hum that fills the andron. It vibrates in the cushions, in the wooden beams of the ceiling, and in the very bones of the guests. It is a sound of unity. In this moment, there are no rivals, no political enemies. There are only voices, rising together in the dark. The symposiarch finishes the third pour. He wipes the golden phial with a clean cloth. The ceremony is over. The invisible guests have been fed. The order has been established. The men are no longer just individuals, they are a community under the protection of the gods. Now, and only now, can the drinking begin. The servants bring the first round of cups to the guests. As the guest takes his kylix, he looks at the floor. He sees the dark stains of the wine, already beginning to dry on the mosaic. It is a reminder that everything of value must be shared. That every pleasure has a cost. And that before we take, we must give. The night has been blessed. The air is clear. The hearts are ready. The journey into the soul of the wine is finally, truly, underway. To understand the rhythm of an ancient night, we must look at how the time was carved. The evening was not a chaotic flow of events, but was divided into 2 distinct and very different parts. The first part was the deipnon, the meal. This was the foundation upon which the rest of the night would be built. Before the deep philosophy, before the wine, there was the food. Imagine the servants entering the andron now. They carry small, low tables made of dark wood, often maple or citrus. These are called trapezi. One table is placed in front of each couch, in front of each reclining guest. The movement is silent. The servants know that the peace of the room must not be broken. The sound of the wooden legs touching the stone floor is a soft, dull thud. A signal that the body is about to be nourished, before the mind is challenged. The food of the ancient Greeks was simple, yet it was an art of the earth. There were no heavy sauces, no complex spices to hide the natural flavors. Think of the bread. It is the masa, a flatbread made of barley. It is warm, and it smells of the grain and the clay oven. It is not just food, it is a tool. There are no forks, no spoons here. You use the bread to scoop up the legumes, to soak up the juices of the fish, to hold the world in your hands. Consider the salted fish. Perhaps it is tuna from the Black Sea or sardines from the nearby coast of Falarin. It has been cured with sea salt and preserved in oil. As you take a small piece, the saltiness wakes up your tongue. It is sharp, and it lingers. Beside the fish, there are osprey. These are the pulses, the beans and lentils that were the backbone of the Athenian diet. They are slow-cooked, seasoned only with a bit of garlic, onion, and a heavy pour of green, peppery olive oil. Think about the olive oil itself. It is the liquid gold of the Mediterranean. It is thick, and it carries the flavor of the sun and the dry, rocky soil. As it coats the beans, it shines in the flickering light of the lamps. The guests eat slowly. Very slowly. In a symposium, rushing is a sign of a lack of culture. Every bite is deliberate. You are not eating to get full, you are eating to sustain the conversation that has not yet even begun. Now, imagine the taste of the greens. Wild herbs gathered from the hillsides around Athens. Dandelion, chicory, mallow. They are slightly bitter, but when dipped in a small bowl of vinegar and oil, they provide a freshness that cuts through the salt of the fish. There are also olives. Not the bright, processed olives of today, but dark, shriveled fruits, cured in brine until they are intense and earthy. Each one is a small explosion of the landscape. There is no wine served yet. This is a crucial detail. The Greeks believed that eating and drinking should be kept separate. During the deipnon, the guests drink only water, or perhaps a small amount of honey water. This is to keep the palate clean, to keep the head clear for the food. The silence in the room is now punctuated only by the soft sound of bread being torn, and the low murmur of men discussing the quality of the harvest. As the main course is finished, the servants move in again. This is the transition. They remove the tables, carrying away the remains of the fish and the crumbs of the barley bread. This removal is a ritual in itself. The room is being cleared, not just of objects, but of the physical need for hunger. Once the tables are gone, the space feels larger. The air feels lighter. But before the wine arrives, there is the trigemata, the second course. These are the delicacies. Small bowls of dried figs. Their skins dusty with natural sugar. Almonds and walnuts, cracked open and served in their shells. Perhaps a piece of cheese made from goat's milk, hard and salty, or a cake made of sesame seeds and honey. Think of the honey. It is the Thymatikos honey from Mount Hymettus. It is the most famous honey in the world. It smells of thyme and wildflowers. It is sticky, and it clings to the roof of the mouth. It provides the final, sweet note to the meal. The nuts provide a crunch. The figs provide a chew. The textures are as important as the flavors. The guests use this time to wash their hands once more. The servants bring the basins around. The fingers, sticky from the honey and the figs, are rinsed in cool water. The crumbs are swept from the floor. The room is being reset. The physical act of eating is over. The body is satisfied. It is now ready to be forgotten, so that the spirit can take over. This division of the night, the meal first, the drinking second, was the secret to the longevity of the symposium. By filling the stomach with bread and fish and pulses, the guests were protecting themselves. The food would act as a buffer for the wine. It ensured that the intoxication would be slow, gentle, and manageable. It was a biological strategy for a philosophical night. Imagine the host looking at his guests. He sees that their faces are relaxed. The initial hunger is gone. They are propped back on their cushions, eyes drifting toward the center of the room where the crater will soon be placed. The transition is almost complete. The deepnon has served its purpose. The foundation is solid. The night is now poised at the edge of its second half. The most famous part. The drinking. But for a moment, just a moment, linger on the memory of the meal. The taste of the salt, the smell of the honey, and the warmth of the barley. The world was simple then. And the night was very, very long. The tables have been cleared, the crumbs have been swept away, and the wine has finally begun its slow, steady circulation around the room. But a symposium was never meant to be a vacuum of silence, nor was it a place for the meaningless chatter of the marketplace. In the ancient andron, conversation was a craft. It was a duty. And tonight, the night is governed by the mandated topic. Imagine the symposiarch raising his hand for silence. The low murmur of the guests fades into a heavy, expectant stillness. He does not suggest a topic lightly. He has been observing the room, gauging the intellectual energy of his companions. He speaks a single sentence, a question, perhaps, or a proposition. Tonight, we shall speak of the nature of friendship. Or perhaps, is justice merely the interest of the stronger? The topic is now the invisible center of the room. It is the gravity that holds all these men together. For the next several hours, every mind must be tethered to this single idea. In our modern world, we jump from one subject to another, distracted by the noise of 1,000 lives. But here, in the dim light of the oil lamps, there is only one path. To wander away from the topic into idle gossip, to speak of taxes, or the weather, or a neighbor's scandal, was seen as a failure of character. It was apeirokalia, a lack of taste. Think about the structure of this debate. It is not a shouting match. It is not about winning an argument. It is about exploration. The conversation follows the circle. From left to right, each man must contribute his piece to the puzzle. When it is your turn, the eyes of the room are upon you. You cannot hide. You must search your memory, your heart, and your reason, to find a thought that is worthy of the wine you are drinking. The Greeks believed that the mind, like the wine, needed to be mixed and balanced. As the first guest speaks, he sets a tone. Perhaps he quotes a line from Homer, or a verse from Hesiod. The words are ancient, but he breathes new life into them, applying them to the question of the night. The other men listen. They do not interrupt. In the andron, listening is a form of respect. To listen is to honor the mind of your neighbor. As the cup moves, the complexity of the topic grows. The second speaker might challenge the first, but he does so with pytho, the art of persuasion. He uses soft words to deliver hard truths. The third speaker might bring in a personal story, a memory of a lost friend, or a moment of political crisis. The topic is no longer a dry, academic question. It is becoming a living, breathing thing, woven from the lives of everyone in the room. Think of the air in the room as the debate deepens. It feels thicker now. Not just from the smoke of the lamps, but from the weight of the ideas. The topic acts as a filter. It filters out the trivialities of daily life. For a few hours, these men are not merchants, or generals, or landowners. They are explorers of the human condition. They are navigating the seas of morality and truth, guided only by the flickering light and the wisdom of the group. Sometimes, the topic is difficult. It might be about death, or the limits of human knowledge. In those moments, the silences between the speakers are long. Very long. You can hear the wick of the lamp crackling. You can hear the distant bark of a dog in the Athenian streets. But the silence is not empty. It is full of thought. Every man is looking inward, searching for an answer to a question that has no simple solution. The wine, of course, plays its part. The symposiarch ensures that the intoxication is just enough to lower the barriers of the ego, but not enough to shatter the logic. This is the elenchus, the process of questioning. Under the influence of the mixture, the truth becomes easier to say, and the pride becomes easier to set aside. The mandated topic becomes a mirror, reflecting the true soul of each guest. Imagine the beauty of a single idea being handled by 20 different minds. It is like a piece of rough marble being carved into a statue. By the end of the night, the topic will have been turned over, examined from every angle, polished by wit, and darkened by doubt. It will not be solved. The Greeks were too wise to think they could solve the great mysteries of life in a single night. But it will be understood more deeply. This was the true purpose of the symposium. Not the drink, not the food, but the shared journey of the mind. The mandated topic was the anchor that kept them from drifting into the sea of nothingness. It was a reminder that human speech is a sacred gift, and that when we come together, we should speak of things that matter. As the night moves toward its middle, and the third or fourth round of wine is served, the conversation reaches its peak. The words are no longer just sounds. They are connections. Bridges built between souls. The mandated topic has done its work. It has transformed a group of individuals into a single, thinking body. Think of that stillness. The flickering shadows on the walls, the smell of the resin, and the sound of a voice, slow and steady, speaking of justice, or love, or the stars. This is the world of the symposium. A world where gossip is forgotten, and the truth is the only guest that truly matters. As the mandated topic begins to take hold of the room, and as the minds of the guests start to weave together in the dim light, we must notice the sound that has been present all along. A sound that does not demand attention, yet without it, the room would lose its soul. This is the work of the allos player. Imagine a figure standing near the shadows of the doorway. Often a young woman, known as an auletress. She is a professional. She is not here to participate in the debate, she is here to provide the frequency upon which the debate rests. In her hands, she holds the double pipes, the alloy. These are not simple instruments. They are carved from the hollowed-out bone of a deer, or perhaps the dark, seasoned wood of the boxwood tree. Think about the physical reality of her task. To play the allos for 5, 6, or 7 hours is a feat of incredible physical endurance. She wears a leather strap called a forbia around her face, covering her cheeks and mouth. This strap helps her manage the immense pressure of the air, allowing her to blow into the reeds without tiring her facial muscles too quickly. Through the slits in the leather, you can see her eyes, calm, focused, observing the room. The sound she creates is unlike anything in our modern world. It is nasal, thick, and deeply resonant. Because there are 2 pipes, she plays a drone and a melody simultaneously. The drone is a constant, low hum that vibrates in the floor tiles, beneath the feet of the reclining men. The melody is a wandering, repetitive line that floats just above the conversation. The Greeks did not see this as music for performance. They saw it as a pharmakon, a medicine for the atmosphere. The allos player is a technician of the air. If the debate becomes too heated, if voices start to rise in anger, she subtly slows the tempo. She brings the pitch down. She uses the vibrations of the reeds to physically calm the nervous systems of the guests. She is the invisible regulator of the evening's peace. Think of the vibration. Sound is just air in motion. And in the enclosed space of the andron, with its thick walls and low ceiling, the sound of the allos becomes a physical presence. It wraps around the words of the speakers. It fills the uncomfortable silences. If a man forgets his point, or if a speaker pauses to find the right word, the allos is there to catch the silence before it becomes awkward. It is a safety net made of sound. Now, consider the life of the instrument itself. Each pipe has holes carved at precise intervals. The player's fingers move over these holes in a slow, hypnotic dance. Down, up, cover, release. The sound changes not because of a button or a key, but because of the living contact between human skin and ancient wood. Every note carries the warmth of her breath. Every vibration carries the moisture of the air. The music is repetitive, almost boring by design. It is not meant to be interesting. If you find yourself focusing on the music, the player has failed. Her goal is to make you forget the music exists, while ensuring that you feel its effects. It is like the scent of the oil lamps, or the texture of the cushions. It is part of the fabric of the room. As the night deepens, the role of the allos player becomes even more critical. As the wine-to-water ratio shifts, the guest's senses begin to blur. The allos acts as a compass. Its steady drone provides a point of reference. Even when the world feels like it is tilting, the sound of the reed remains straight. It remains true. It is the only thing in the room that does not get drunk. Imagine the shadow she casts on the wall. A long, thin silhouette, with the 2 pipes extending like the beak of a strange bird. In the flickering light, she looks less like a person and more like a statue brought to life. She is the guardian of the tempo. She knows when the first part of the night is ending. She knows when the philosophical debate is giving way to the lighter, more musical scholia or drinking songs. She must also watch the symposiarch. A single nod from him can change the music from the solemn Dorian mode to the more emotional Lydian mode. She is the instrument through which his will is expressed. If he wants the guests to reflect, she plays low. If he wants them to rejoice, she lifts the pitch. Think of the silence that will come when she finally stops. At the end of the night, when her breath is spent and the pipes are laid in their velvet-lined case, the room will feel unnervingly empty. The guests will realize, only then, how much they relied on that constant, nasal hum to keep their thoughts organized. The alas player is the unsung hero of the symposium, a silent witness to the greatest thoughts of the age. She breathes life into the reeds, and in doing so, she breathes structure into the night. Listen to the ghost of that sound. The vibrating reed, the steady breath, and the slow movement of the fingers. This is the sound of the ancient night. This is the music of the soul in repose. As the night reaches its steady middle, and the oil in the lamps begins to burn low, a strange phenomenon begins to take place within the walls of the andron. It is something that cannot be seen, but it is felt by every man reclining on his left elbow. It is the sense of intellectual equality. And this equality is not born from a law or a decree, but from the very geometry of the room. The circular seating arrangement. Imagine looking down at the room from above. You would see a ring of men, their bodies aligned in a perfect, unbroken circle. In the ancient world, space was power. In the marketplace, in the assembly, or in the courts, some men stood higher than others. There were platforms, there were thrones, there were front rows and back rows. But here, in the sanctuary of the symposium, the architecture has abolished the concept of the head of the table. Think about the psychology of the circle. In a circle, every point is equidistant from the center. Every man is facing every other man. There is no place to hide, and there is no place to dominate. If you speak, you are speaking to everyone. If you listen, you are listening to the whole. This physical arrangement forces a mental shift. The wealthy landowner, whose fields stretch to the horizon, finds himself at the exact same eye level as the struggling poet, whose only wealth is his meter and his rhyme. The couches, the klinai, are all of equal height. As you recline, you realize that your gaze does not have to tilt upward to see your superior, and it does not have to tilt downward to see your inferior. This horizontal alignment is a powerful social medicine. It strips away the armor of the day. The general removes his helmet, the judge removes his robe, and here, on the cushions, they are simply minds. Just minds, attempting to navigate the dark waters of the night's topic. In the dim light of the flickering lamps, the faces of the men become softened. The sharp lines of status and age begin to blur. The wine, mixed precisely by the symposiarch, acts as a further equalizer. It dissolves the ego. It lowers the walls of the self. When a man speaks from his couch, his words are judged not by the silk of his tunic, but by the weight of his logic. In this room, a brilliant thought from a poor man carries more gravity than a dull thought from a king. Consider the silence that follows a particularly deep insight. In the circle, that silence is shared equally. It is not an awkward pause, but a communal breath. Everyone feels the same vibration of the alas. Everyone smells the same resin from the lamps. The shared physical environment reinforces the shared intellectual journey. The Greeks called this isonomia, the equality of rights, but here it is isogoria, the equality of speech. The circular arrangement also creates a sense of accountability. You cannot speak of falsehood without looking into the eyes of your peers. You cannot be arrogant without seeing the subtle frowns of the men across from you. The circle is a mirror. It reflects your character back at you. If you are wise, the circle embraces you. If you are a fool, the circle remains quiet until you find your way back to reason. Think about the center of the room, the empty space. In many ways, this empty center is the most important part of the architecture. It is the koinon, the common ground. It is where the ideas are placed, like offerings. Each man reaches from his couch and places his thought into the center. These thoughts then mix, like the wine in the crater, becoming something larger than any one individual. By the end of the night, it is no longer clear who started a certain line of reasoning. The wisdom belongs to the circle, not to the man. This was the secret heart of Greek democracy. Long before they voted in the Knicks, they learned how to listen in the andron. They learned that a society is only as strong as its ability to recline together, to speak without fear, and to listen without prejudice. The boring geometry of the room was actually a radical experiment in human connection. As the hours crawl toward the dawn, the guest feels a profound sense of peace. The pressure on his left elbow is still there, but it no longer matters. He feels the strength of the ring. He feels that he is part of a collective mind. Whether he is rich or poor, young or old, he is a symposiast. He is an equal link in a chain of thought that stretches back to the beginning of time. Think of the stillness of that realization. The shadows dancing on the mosaic dolphins, the low, nasal hum of the alos, and the steady, quiet voices of men who have forgotten their pride. This is the illusion of equality that becomes a reality one night at a time. The night is deep. The circle is strong. And the truth, shared by all, is the only thing that remains standing. As the night moves into its quietest hours, we must look closely at the object held in the guest's right hand. It is not a heavy mug, nor is it a deep glass. It is the kylix, a drinking vessel that is as much a test of character as it is a work of art. To the modern eye, its shape seems impractical, almost frustrating. But to the ancient Greek, the mechanics of the kylix were a vital part of the evening's discipline. Imagine the shape of this vessel. It is wide, very wide, and incredibly shallow. It sits upon a slender, elegant stem rising from a flat base. Two thin handles, like delicate ears, curve out from its sides. When filled with the dark, diluted wine, the liquid sits precariously close to the rim. This is not a cup for the careless. This is not a cup for the hurried. Think about the weight of the kylix. It is made of fine, terracotta clay, fired in the kilns of the Karameikos district. It is light, almost fragile in the hand. But when it is full of wine, its balance shifts. Because it is so wide, the center of gravity is constantly moving. If you tilt it too quickly, the wine does not just flow, it surges. It rushes toward the edge like a miniature tide. To drink from a kylix while reclining on your left elbow is a feat of slow, deliberate coordination. You must use your right hand to grip one of the thin handles. You lift it slowly, watching the surface of the wine. In the flickering light of the oil lamps, the wine looks like a dark, moving mirror. You bring the rim to your lips, and you must tilt your head back at just the right angle. If you are too aggressive, the wine will spill over the wide sides, staining your clean tunic and shaming you in front of the circle. Consider the interior of the cup. The tanda. This is the most fascinating part of the kylix's mechanics. At the bottom of the shallow bowl, hidden beneath the dark wine, is a painting. Perhaps it is the face of Dionysus, or the large, staring eyes of a Gorgon. Or maybe it is a scene of a ship sailing through a sea of dolphins. As you drink, the image is slowly revealed. It is a reward for your patience. But it is also a warning. As the liquid recedes, and the eyes at the bottom of the cup begin to stare back at you, you are reminded that you are being watched. Even in your moments of pleasure, the gods, or the eyes of society, are observing your self-control. The mechanics of the cup are designed to make you self-aware. One sip at a time. Think of the sound of the kylix. When it is placed back on the small wooden table, the ceramic makes a soft, high-pitched tink. It is a fragile sound, a sound that reminds the guest of the fragility of the night itself. Everything in this room, the conversation, the music, the peace, is as delicate as the clay in his hand. If he becomes too loud or too clumsy, the balance is broken. There is also the matter of kottabos, the game that turned the mechanics of the cup into a sport. At the end of a round, a small amount of dregs would remain at the bottom of the wide bowl. The guest would hook his finger through one of the handles, and with a swift, snapping motion of the wrist, he would fling the remaining drops at a target in the center of the room. Imagine the trajectory of those drops. Because the kylix is wide, it allows for a perfect, controlled flick. The wine flies through the air, catching the light like tiny rubies, before striking the bronze disc with a sharp clang. Even in play, the Greek man was testing his motor skills, proving that despite the wine, his hand was still steady, his eye was still sharp. Now, think of the texture of the clay against the lips. It is cool, slightly porous, and it smells of the earth from which it was formed. The kylix is a bridge between the fruit of the vine and the mind of the man. It forces a rhythm. Sip, lower, breathe. Sip, lower, breathe. The wide rim allows the aroma of the wine to hit the nose fully before the liquid even touches the tongue. It is a sensory experience that demands a slow pace. In our world, we drink from deep vessels that hide the liquid. But the kylix hides nothing. It is open. It is honest. It is a vessel for a civilization that valued transparency, even in its intoxication. As the guest holds the handles, he feels the history of his city. He feels the work of the potter, the vision of the painter, and the weight of the tradition. The night is moving. The kylix is being refilled. The eyes at the bottom of the bowl are waiting to be seen once more. And the guest, propped on his elbow, prepares for another slow, careful journey to the rim. Think of the stillness. The flickering shadows, the nasal hum of the alos, and the cool, wide bowl of the kylix. This is the geometry of the soul in repose. This is the slow, beautiful mechanics of a night that never wants to end. As the night moves deeper into the shadows, and the intellectual fire of the mandated topic begins to soften into a warm, glowing ember, the atmosphere of the andron undergoes another transformation. The serious weight of philosophy begins to give way to a more playful, yet equally disciplined ritual. This is the hour of kottabos, a game that turned the very remains of the wine into a test of a man's soul, his steady hand, and his secret desires. Imagine the scene as the last drops of the mixture linger at the bottom of the kylix. In the ancient world, nothing was without meaning, not even the dregs. The guests are still reclining on their left elbows, their bodies rooted to the cushions, but their focus has shifted from the words of their neighbors to the center of the room. Think about the physical mechanics of this game, which followed the slow, deliberate rhythm of the night. A guest does not sit up to play. He remains in his horizontal state, maintaining the elegance of the klinai posture. He hooks his right index finger through one of the delicate handles of his wide, shallow cup. He balances the clay vessel on the back of his hand, feeling the cool, porous texture of the terracotta. The target is placed in the center of the mosaic floor. It is a tall, slender bronze stand, rising like a lonely tree in the middle of the room. At the very top, a small bronze disc, called the plastinx, is balanced on a needle-thin point. Further down the pole, another, larger disc waits in silence. The goal is a masterpiece of precision. You must fling the remaining drops of your wine, the latex, with a sudden, snapping flick of the wrist, so that they fly through the air and strike the small disc, knocking it down to hit the larger one below. Consider the sound of that silence before the throw. The alas player has shifted her melody to a low, repetitive pulse. The flickering oil lamps cast long, dancing shadows of the bronze stand against the mud brick walls. The guest takes a breath, slow and steady. He calculates the distance, the weight of the liquid, and the angle of his arm. The flick of the wrist is a swift, graceful motion. The wine leaves the wide bowl of the kylix, not as a spray, but as a single, cohesive unit of liquid. In the dim, golden light, it looks like a dark, ruby-colored bird taking flight across the room. It travels through the scent of resin and the warm air of the andron. If the aim is true, if the guest is still a master of his senses, there is a sudden, sharp, melodic ring. Clang. The sound of the bronze discs striking each other vibrates through the room. It is a resonant, metallic echo that cuts through the hum of the pipes. This sound is the ultimate victory. It is the proof that even in the middle of the night, even after many cups of the mixture, the man is still centered. He is still a citizen of balance. But as we look closer, we see that kottabos was not just about skill. It was about the heart. As a man prepared his shot, he would often whisper the name of the one he loved, or the one he wished to conquer. He believed that the purity of the bronze chime was an omen from the gods. A loud, clear ring meant his love was returned. A silent miss meant his heart must remain in the shadows. The game was a way of speaking to the unseen, using the wine as a messenger. Now, think of the floor. The beautiful mosaic, with its depictions of dolphins and waves, is now splattered with red stains. To a modern eye, this would be seen as a mess to be cleaned. But to the host, these stains were the physical map of a successful symposium. Each red drop on the stone was a memory of a laugh, a challenge, or a secret whispered into the night. The room was being painted by the movements of the guests. The mechanics of the kylix, which we discussed before, were perfectly designed for this game. Its wide, shallow bowl allowed the wine to be flung with incredible accuracy. The handles provided the perfect pivot point for the finger. Even in their leisure, the Greeks used tools that demanded grace. They did not want games that were easy, they wanted games that were beautiful. Imagine the energy of the room as the game moves from one guest to the next around the circle. One man misses, his wine hitting the floor with a soft, dull splash. The room groans in sympathy. Another man hits the mark perfectly, and the bronze rings out like a bell. The room erupts in quiet, respectful applause. The competition is gentle, a shared experience that binds the circle even tighter. As the hours crawl toward the dawn, the kottabos stand becomes a silent monument to the night's endurance. It is wet with wine. The bronze is polished by the constant strikes. The floor around it is dark and sweet-smelling. The servants move like shadows, refilling the cups for one last round, avoiding the imaginary lines of the flying wine. Think of the stillness that returns when the game is finally done. The bronze pole is still. The guests are exhausted, their muscles relaxed, their minds floating in a state of enthusiasmus. The play has served its purpose. It has released the final tensions of the ego. It has prepared them for the end of the night. The night is very deep now. The oil in the lamps is almost spent. The floor is a tapestry of wine and shadows. And the soul of the symposium, reflected in the cold, wet bronze of the target, is at peace. We are moving toward the final breath of the evening. But the sound of the metal, the clear, sharp ring of the hit, still lingers in the air, a ghost of the joy they shared. As the night continues to breathe in the dim, golden light of the andron, we must address a presence that is often misunderstood in the grand, marble history of these ancient walls. The symposium was, in its legal and social bones, a world of men. The wives, the daughters, and the sisters of the Athenian citizens were strictly excluded from this room. They remained in the gynaeconitis, the women's quarters, high above or deep within the quietest parts of the house, far from the smell of the unmixed wine, far from the heat of the political debate, and far from the gaze of the strangers. But the andron was not entirely empty of the feminine. As the guests recline on their left elbows, their bodies forming that familiar, sacred circle, they are not alone. There are women here, but they are women who exist outside the traditional boundaries of the Athenian home. They are the hetairai, and their role in the mechanics of the night was as essential, as profound, and as complex as the wine itself. Imagine these women entering the room as the first course of the meal ends. They do not enter as servants, though they are not guests in the traditional sense either. A hetairai was literally a companion. Unlike the wives of the citizens, these women were highly educated, independent, and masters of the very arts that the symposium demanded. They were the only women in Athens who could walk into a room of the city's most powerful men, and speak to them as equals. Think about the physical space they occupied. A hetairai did not have a dedicated couch, but she moved with a quiet, fluid grace between the guests. She might sit at the foot of a prominent philosopher, or recline on the edge of a couch beside a young poet. Her presence was a bridge between the physical and the intellectual. She was there to sharpen the wit of the men, to provide a counterpoint to their heavy arguments, and to ensure that the conversation never became too dry or too predictable. The sound of their voices was a vital part of the night's atmosphere. While the men spoke of the laws of the city or the nature of justice, the hetairai brought the music of the mind. They could quote the delicate, burning verses of Sappho from memory. They could challenge a man's logic on the nature of the soul with a quick, sharp wit that left the room in a thoughtful silence. To listen to a hetairai speak was to realize that intelligence is not bound by the laws of the polis. Consider the auletress, the flute girl we have seen standing in the shadows. She, too, was a constant, breathing presence. While the guests debated the future of the war or the price of grain, she provided the rhythm with her steady, nasal breath. Her work was one of invisible, exhausting labor. She stood for hours, her cheeks supported by the leather phobia, her eyes watching the symposiarch for the slightest signal to change the mood. To the men, she was often part of the furniture of the room, a living, breathing instrument. But to the night itself, she was the heartbeat. The presence of these women in the andron created a complex, invisible tension. In a society that kept its respectable women hidden behind heavy veils and locked doors, the symposium was a rare, almost magical space where the genders met in a state of intellectual play. But it was a fragile equality. The hetairai were often foreigners, or women who had no legal standing in the city. Their freedom came at the cost of their social respectability. Yet, inside the circle of the couches, they were often the most influential people in the room. Think of the scent they brought into the heavy air. Not just the smell of the pine resin in the wine or the smoke of the oil lamps, but the scent of expensive, exotic perfumes. Oils of rose, jasmine, and bitter almond imported from the distant east. This scent mingled with the warmth of the room, creating a layer of sensory complexity that defined the middle of the night. The soft rustle of their fine linen or silk garments was a rhythmic sound, a gentle whisper that competed with the hum of the alas. As the oil in the lamps burns lower, and the wine begins to take its inevitable toll, the role of the women shifts once more. They become the guardians of the collective mood. When a guest becomes too aggressive, a hetairai might reach out and touch his hand, a gesture of silence and balance. When a guest falls into a heavy, drunken melancholy, she might offer a riddle or a story from a land across the sea. They were the diplomats of the andron, the silent architects of the evening's peace. Imagine the dancers, the acrobats who appeared as the night reached its peak. These women turned the empty center of the room, the koinon, into a stage of pure motion. They moved through the flickering shadows with a grace that seemed to defy the very gravity of the stone floor. They were the physical expression of the wine's energy. As they spun, their long shadows danced across the mosaic dolphins, creating a world of movement in a room of reclining, stationary men. But let us not forget the reality of their lives when the lamps were finally extinguished. When the sun rose over the hills of Attica, and the guests stumbled back to their families, these women remained in the shadows of the city's memory. They were the ghosts of the Athenian night. Brilliant, essential, and yet erased from the official histories that celebrated the men they entertained. Their laughter was the soundtrack of the Golden Age, yet it was a laughter that was never meant to be recorded. Think of the stillness of a companion as she watches a man fall asleep on his embroidered cushion. She is the only witness to his true vulnerability. She knows his secrets, his hidden fears, and his private failures. In the dim, dying light, she is the only one who truly sees the room for what it is. A beautiful, expensive, and temporary illusion of harmony. The night is moving toward its final, mysterious transformation. The voices of the men are growing quiet, heavy with the mixture and the hour. The alas player takes a long, deep breath, her pipes resting for a moment against her chest. The women of the symposium, the companions of the night, are still there, moving like shadows in the flickering light. Waiting for the last cup to be poured. Waiting for the world to return to its order. Listen to the silence of the room. The smell of the rose oil, the soft sound of a silk sleeve brushing against the wooden edge of a couch, and the slow, steady breathing of a world that is almost spent. The presence of the excluded is what made the inclusion of the night possible. And as the lamps begin to die, their influence remains, a soft, persistent echo in the air, reminding us that history is often written in the shadows. The night has reached its deepest point. The shadows on the walls of the andron are now long and heavy, stretching across the floor like the memories of the day. The wine has been flowing for hours, yet, if you look around the circle, you will not see chaos. You will not see the mindless madness that one might expect from such a long gathering. This is because the entire evening has been governed by a single, invisible force. A concept that was the very heartbeat of the Greek soul. Sophrosyne. Sophrosyne is a word that is difficult to translate into our modern, hurried languages. It is often called self-control or moderation. But to the men reclining here, it was something much more profound. It was a state of being, a harmony between the mind and the body. It was the internal symposiarch that lived inside every citizen, a silent voice that whispered when to speak and when to remain silent. Imagine the challenge of this night. You are surrounded by beauty, by the scent of roasted meats and expensive perfumes. You are holding a wide, shallow kylix filled with the gift of Dionysus. The music of the aulos is vibrating in your chest. It would be so easy to let go, to drink until the world vanishes, to shout, to boast, to lose the dignity of your name. But the Greek man believes that to lose control is to lose his humanity. To become a slave to his own desires is the ultimate form of defeat. Think about the wine in your cup. As we discussed, it has been mixed with water. This physical mixture is the external expression of sophrosyne. The wine is the passion, the wild, untamed energy of life. The water is the reason, the logic, the boundary. By drinking the mixture, you are practicing the art of being a human. You are inviting the fire into your soul, but only as much as your reason can handle. The guests watch each other, not with judgment, but with a quiet, shared understanding. If a man speaks too loudly, if his words become tangled and his logic fades, he has failed the test of sophrosyne. He has let the wine become the master. In the andron, the most respected man is not the one who can drink the most, but the one who can drink the most while remaining exactly who he is. The one whose mind remains as clear as the water in the crater, even as his heart grows warm with the grape. Consider the architecture of the soul that this requires. To practice sophrosyne is to live on the edge of a blade. You want to reach enthusiasmus, that divine inspiration where the gods speak through you. But you must not fall into hubris, the arrogant pride that leads to destruction. The symposium is a training ground for the city. If a man can control himself here, in the heat of the night, he can be trusted to control himself in the assembly, in the court, and on the battlefield. As the hours crawl toward the dawn, the practice of sophrosyne becomes more difficult. The body is tired. The left elbow is sore from the weight of the torso. The eyes are heavy from the smoke of the dying lamps. This is when the true character is revealed. The man who can still quote a line of Homer with perfect meter, the man who can still listen to his friend's argument without interruption, he is the one who possesses the golden mean. Think of the silence of a man practicing this moderation. He holds his kylix, looking at the eyes painted at the bottom of the bowl. He feels the wine on his tongue, but he does not gulp it down. He lets it linger. He appreciates the flavor, the history, and the craftsmanship, but he remains the master of the vessel. He knows that the moment he loses his sophrosyne, the symposium ends for him, even if he is still in the room. This philosophy was not about denying pleasure. The Greeks loved pleasure. They loved the feast, the wine, and the beauty of the companions. But they believed that pleasure is only truly sweet when it is governed by the mind. An animal can eat and drink until it is sick. Only a human can choose to stop at the point of perfect harmony. This choice is what made them feel civilized in a world they saw as barbarian. Imagine the wisdom of this restraint. It creates a space where every man feels safe. You can share your deepest thoughts because you know that the men around you are not slaves to their impulses. The circle of couches is a circle of trust. And that trust is built on the foundation of sofrosine. It is the glue that keeps the night from shattering into 1,000 pieces of chaos. As the stars begin to fade outside the high windows, and the alas player's breath becomes a soft, rhythmic whisper, the guests feel a sense of accomplishment. They have navigated the Sea of Dionysus and returned to the shore. They have experienced the heights of joy without losing the ground beneath their feet. This is the quiet victory of the balanced soul. Listen to the stillness of the room. The smell of the cooling oil, the sound of a steady breath, and the clink of a ceramic base against a wooden table. Sofrosine is not a loud virtue. It is a silent one. It is the peace that comes from knowing you are the ruler of your own kingdom. The night is almost over. The philosophy of the mixture has proven its worth. And as the final toasts are prepared, the men of the symposium stand, or recline, as masters of themselves, ready to face the morning sun with clear eyes and steady hearts. While the surface of the symposium was a sea of philosophy, poetry, and the slow, rhythmic hum of the alas, there was another current flowing through the andron. A current of power. A current of silver and stone. Behind the laughter, and beneath the high-minded talk of sofrosine, the real business of Athens was being conducted. The symposium was not just a sanctuary of the mind, it was the engine room of the city-state. Imagine the room in these late hours. The wine has softened the sharp edges of the ego. The hetairai have woven a web of comfort. And the mandated topic has established a sense of trust. This is the perfect environment for the symposiums, the political factions, to do their work. In the public assembly, the Knicks, men shouted and argued under the harsh light of the sun. But in the andron, under the soft, flickering light of the oil lamps, the true deals were struck. Think about the physical proximity of the couches. You are reclining just inches away from a man who controls the silver mines of Laurium, or a general who commands the triremes in the Aegean Sea. As you share a kylix, the barriers of formality disappear. A whisper across the gap between the cushions can change the fate of a trade route. A quiet nod over the rim of a cup can seal a marriage alliance that unites two of the most powerful families in the city. Consider the economic nature of the room. To host a symposium of this scale was an act of liturgia, a public service that cost a small fortune. The fine furniture, the imported wine, the professional musicians, and the specialized food. This was not just a party, it was a display of Plutos, of wealth. By inviting his peers, the host was asserting his place in the hierarchy. He was showing that he had the resources to govern, the resources to lead. The deals made here were not written on papyrus. They were written in the memory of the wine. A loan for a new merchant ship, a contract for the harvest of an olive grove, a promise of support in the next election for the office of archon. These agreements were sacred because they were made in the presence of the gods, during the libations. To break a deal made at a symposium was to break the xenia, the sacred law of hospitality. It was a social death. Imagine the subtle language of the night. A guest might quote a line from a tragedy about a king who lost his kingdom through betrayal. To the outside world, he is just discussing literature. But to the man reclining next to him, it is a warning. a message that the political winds are shifting. Every word had a double meaning. Every toast was a test of loyalty. The symposium was a theater where the play was the future of the city itself. Think about the silence of the servants. They move like ghosts, refilling the cups, hearing everything but saying nothing. They are the keepers of the city's secrets. They hear the plans for the next tax, the whispers of a planned coup, or the quiet admission of a debt that can never be paid. In this room, the private lives of the elite were laid bare, and the economic foundation of Athens was reinforced, one sip at a time. The Greeks understood that human beings are more than just rational voters. They knew that we are emotional creatures who need to eat, drink, and bond before we can cooperate. The symposium provided the social glue that held the polis together. Without these nights of shared wine, the friction of democracy might have torn the city apart. Here, political enemies could find a common ground, if only for a few hours. They could reach a compromise while listening to a poem, a compromise that would have been impossible in the heated air of the public square. As the stars begin to look down through the high windows, and the final round of the game of kottabos is played, the men know that their work is done. The deals are struck. The alliances are firm. The silver has changed hands in the minds of the men, even if it has not yet left their coffers. The symposium has fulfilled its secret purpose. It has maintained the order of the ruling class. Think of the stillness of that realization. The smell of the dying lamps, the taste of the dregs in the cup, and the heavy, satisfied breathing of men who have secured their future. Behind the mask of the philosopher lived the merchant and the politician. And both were satisfied by the night. The night is fading. The economy of the city is secure. The political wheels have been greased by the wine. And the circle of couches, which seemed so disconnected from the world outside, has actually shaped the world for years to come. Listen to the quiet hum of the room. The deals are silent now. The whispers have ended. But the city of Athens, in the morning light, will wake up a different place because of what happened here, in the dark, over the wine. The night is no longer young. The stars have moved across the sky, and the oil in the lamps has burned down to a final, flickering amber. We have spent hours speaking of sophrosine, of the perfect mixture of wine and water, and of the rigid rules that govern the circle. But as the fourth or fifth round of the crater is emptied, a new truth begins to emerge. The realization that order, no matter how carefully constructed, is a fragile thing. It is a thin, glass-like shell that can shatter with a single, unintended word. Imagine the atmosphere in the andron now. The formal posture of the early evening is gone. Guests who once sat straight on their left elbows are now leaning further back, their bodies heavy with the mixture. The wreaths of ivy and myrtle on their heads are slightly tilted, some leaves falling onto the cushions like autumn rain. The Basilius of the night, the symposiarch, must work harder now. He can feel the tension in the air. It is the tension of the wild pulse of Dionysus, pushing against the walls of human reason. Think about the silence of the room. It is no longer the respectful silence of a lecture. It is a heavy, charged silence. The Greeks knew that wine was a pharmakon, both a medicine and a poison. It could reveal the truth, but it could also reveal the beast. As the guests look at one another, the old political rivalries, the ancient family feuds, and the hidden jealousies of the morning begin to simmer beneath the surface. The order of the room depends entirely on the collective will to remain civilized. And that will, at this hour, is beginning to fray. Consider the sound of a voice that rises just a little too high, just a decibel above the others. In the early night, this would have been corrected with a joke or a gentle glance. But now, it lingers. It hangs in the air like smoke. The alas player, sensing the shift, plays a melody that is lower, more grounded, trying to pull the energy of the room back down to the earth. She is the weaver of the invisible safety net, but even her breath is tired. The fragility of the night is now a physical presence. The Greeks were obsessed with hubris, the overweening pride that leads to ruin. They knew that the Symposium was the most dangerous place for a man's soul. Here, in the comfort of the cushions, with the music and the wine, a man might begin to feel like a god. And once a man feels like a god, he forgets the laws of the men around him. He might say something cruel to his host. He might challenge a friend to a bet he cannot pay. The fragility of order is the fragility of the human ego, which can be inflated or destroyed by a single cup. Imagine the eyes of the symposiarch as he watches the mixing bowl. He is the only one who truly understands how close they are to the edge. He knows that if he calls for one more unmixed cup, the andron will transform from a temple of philosophy into a room of chaos. This is the kottabos, the unmixed danger. The rules were not made to be rigid, they were made to be the anchors in a storm. But even the strongest anchor can be pulled from the seabed if the waves are high enough. Think of the mosaic floor, now wet with the wine from the kottabos game. The dolphins and the gods depicted in the stone are slippery. If a guest tries to stand, his feet might fail him. His physical instability is a mirror of his mental state. The architecture of the house is solid, but the architecture of the mind is liquid. It is flowing, changing, and becoming harder to contain. The walls of the room are a boundary, but they cannot stop the soul from wandering into the dark places. As the guests look out of the high windows, they see the pale light of the moon hitting the marble of the Acropolis in the distance. The city is out there, waiting for them to return. But for now, they are in this bubble of firelight and wine. They are holding on to the last threads of their dignity. There is a beauty in this fragility. It is the beauty of a flame that is about to go out. It is the beauty of a harmony that is maintained through sheer, exhausting effort. The Greeks did not fear this fragility, they respected it. They knew that life itself is a symposium that ends in the dark. They understood that every moment of peace is a victory over the chaos that lives inside us all. The order was not a given, it was a choice. A choice made every time a man decided to listen instead of shout. A choice made every time a guest reached for the water before the wine. Now, imagine the silence that falls when the music finally stops for a moment. You can hear the rhythmic breathing of 20 men. You can hear the soft, distant sound of the city waking up. The order has held, but only just. The guests are tired, their minds are a blur of poetry and politics. They are standing on the threshold of the morning, and the transition will be difficult. Think of the fragility of your own memory of this night. As the sun rises, the details will begin to fade. The deep insights will become vague feelings. The faces of the friends will become shadows. The symposium is a temporary state of grace, a fleeting island of light in a sea of darkness. And like all islands, it is slowly being eroded by the waves of time. The night is almost spent. The lamps are dying. The floor is stained. But the circle is still unbroken. The fragility has not turned into a fracture. Not yet. The order has survived one more night. Listen to the stillness of the final hour. The smell of the cold oil, the sound of a long, heavy sigh, and the feeling of the hardwood beneath the soft cushions. This is the end of the balance. This is the moment before the world returns to its noisy, daytime self. The night is silent. The fragile shell is intact. And the soul of the symposium, for now, is at rest. The lamps are now gasping for their last drops of oil. The andron, which for hours was a sanctuary of structured thought and measured wine, is beginning to dissolve. The circle of couches is breaking. This is the moment of the kottabos, the final, boisterous procession that marks the transition from the private world of the symposium to the public streets of Athens. It is the release of all the energy that has been carefully contained since the first libation was poured. Imagine the guests struggling to find their sandals in the dim light. Their movements are heavy, their limbs are warm and loose from the mixture. The hetairai and the alos players are moving with them, no longer just background figures, but now the leaders of the dance. The ivy wreaths, once crisp and green, are now wilted and tangled in the men's hair. They stand up from their cushions, and for the first time in many hours, the vertical world returns. Think about the sound as the heavy wooden door of the house is thrown open. The cool, night air of Athens rushes into the warm, resin-scented room. It is a shock to the senses. The silence of the sleeping city is suddenly broken by the sound of the alos, now playing a faster, wilder rhythm. The kottabos is not a march, it is a stumble, a dance, a rhythmic wander through the dark, narrow streets. The guests carry torches now. Long pieces of wood dipped in pitch, burning with a bright, orange flame that throws chaotic shadows against the whitewashed walls of the neighbors' houses. As they move through the city, they are no longer just citizens. They are the followers of Dionysus. They shout to the moon, they sing scholia, the drinking songs they practiced in the safety of the andron. But now, their voices echo off the cold stone of the marketplace. Consider the fragility of this moment. The sophrosyne, that beautiful self-control we discussed, is now being tested in the open air. For some, the kottabos is a celebration of life. For others, it is a descent into hubris. They might knock on the doors of friends to wake them. They might engage in playful, or sometimes aggressive, mockery of the people they pass. The city of Athens becomes a stage, and the kottabos is the final, unscripted act of the play. Imagine the physical sensation of walking after hours of reclining. The ground feels unsteady beneath the feet. The torchlight flickers in the eyes, making the world appear like a series of disjointed images. The smell of the night air, sea salt from the Piraeus, wood smoke from the bakeries, and the damp earth of the gardens, mingles with the lingering scent of the wine on their breath. They are moving between two worlds. The world of the divine glow, and the world of the morning headache. The alos player is the guide of this madness. Her pipes are no longer a whisper, they are a command. Breath, blow, rhythm. She leads the procession toward the next house, or perhaps toward the temple. The kottabos is a way of saying that the spirit of the symposium cannot be contained within four walls. It must overflow into the city. It must touch the dark corners of the streets before it dies out. Think of the neighbors, waking up to the sound of the laughter and the flutes. They know this sound. They know that another symposium has reached its end. There is no anger, only a quiet recognition of the cycle of the night. The kottabos is the heartbeat of the Athenian night, a reminder that the city is alive even when it is sleeping. As the procession moves further from the host's house, the group begins to thin. One by one, guests peel away into the shadows, heading toward their own homes. The torches burn out, leaving only the pale light of the stars to guide them. The laughter becomes more distant. The music of the aulos fades into the sound of the wind. The kottabos is dissolving, just as the symposium dissolved before it. Imagine the last guest reaching his own door. He is alone now. The warmth of the wine is still in his chest, but the cold of the morning is on his skin. He looks back at the empty street. The kottabos is gone. The city is silent once more. He has survived the night. He has participated in the great ritual of his people. He is tired, profoundly tired, but his soul is full of the echoes of the philosophy, the music, and the wine. This exit was the necessary conclusion. You cannot stay in the andron forever. You must return to the world of the sun. But you return changed. The kottabos was the bridge that brought the wisdom of the dark back into the light of the day. It was the final, messy, beautiful breath of the evening. Think of the stillness that finally settles over the guest as he lays down in his own bed. The room is quiet. The world is steady. But in his mind, he can still hear the ring of the kottabos, he can still see the swirling wine in the crater, and he can still feel the rhythm of the kottabos in his blood. The night is over. The procession has ended. The soul is at rest. The sun has finally begun its slow, inevitable ascent over the hills of Attica. The long, deep shadows of the andron have vanished, replaced by the harsh, unforgiving light of a new day. The guests are gone. The music of the aulos has faded into the morning breeze. The crater is empty, and the dregs of the wine have dried into dark stains on the mosaic floor. But as we stand in the silence of this empty room, we realize that the symposium has not truly ended. It remains. Think about the weight of that word. Remains. It is not just a ghost of a party or a footnote in a dusty history book. The symposium is a living, breathing part of the foundation of our own world. Every time we sit down with friends to discuss a difficult idea, every time we share a meal that is governed by the rules of respect and listening, every time we seek the truth through the fog of our own emotions, we are reclining on those ancient cushions. We are still within the circle. Imagine the journey of these ideas across the centuries. The conversations that happened in these dim rooms did not stay within the mud brick walls of Athens. They traveled. They were written down by men like Plato and Xenophon, turned into dialogues that would be read by students in Alexandria, by monks in the Middle Ages, and by philosophers in the Enlightenment. The mandated topic of a single night in a small house in the Kerameikos district became the universal topic of humanity. Consider the architecture of our own minds. The concepts of sophrosyne, the balance between passion and reason, the belief that democracy requires the ability to listen as much as the ability to speak, these were not born in the sunlight of the marketplace. They were forged in the firelight of the symposium. They were tested in the safety of the mixture. The Greeks knew that before you could govern a city, you had to learn how to govern a conversation. And we are still trying to master that lesson today. Think of the physical objects that remain. The kylix, with its delicate handles and the hidden eyes at the bottom, now sits behind glass in the museums of London, Paris, and New York. They are cold now. They no longer hold the warmth of the diluted wine, or the touch of a human hand. But when we look at them, we can still feel the vibration of the night they once belonged to. They are the silent witnesses to a civilization that understood that beauty and thought are inseparable. The legacy of the gathering is also found in our language. The word symposium itself has survived, though its meaning has changed. Today, we think of it as a formal academic meeting. But the heart of the word, sympinein, to drink together, is a reminder of a time when wisdom was not something you sought in isolation. It was something you built with others. It was a collective act of being alive. Imagine the ghost of the symposiarch watching us now. He would wonder at our hurry. He would wonder at the way we consume information without digesting it, the way we shout without listening, and the way we drink without a mixture. He would remind us that the night is long, and that the truth is never found in a rush. He would tell us to be still, to find our own circle, to elect our own master of the night. Think of the silence of the andron once more. The smell of the extinguished lamps is gone. The dust has settled on the couches. But if you close your eyes, you can still hear the clink of the ceramic against the wood. You can still hear the nasal hum of the double reeds. You can still feel the pressure of the left elbow against the soft, embroidered cushion. The symposium is a place in the mind, a sanctuary that is always open, if we are willing to be quiet enough to enter. As we conclude this long journey through the Athenian night, let the spirit of the mixture stay with you. Remember that passion needs reason, that gravity needs laughter, and that every human connection is a libation poured to the gods of the future. The sun is up, the city is noisy, and the modern world is calling. But the circle remains. Unbroken, patient, and eternal. The lamps are out. The wine is spent. The night is a memory. But the soul of the symposium is forever.